1-9, multiplying and dividing integers. Alright, so today our objective is to multiply and divide integers. Remember, integers are positive, negative, whole numbers, including 0. So, our basic rules here, if the signs are the same, which means if you have a positive times a positive, that equals a positive. A negative times a negative equals a positive. So if the signs are the same, the answer is positive. So if you see two positives or two negatives, then your answer is going to be positive. Now, if that doesn't make sense when it comes to the negatives, I'll touch on that in a minute and try to give you an explanation that might make a little more sense. So what happens if the signs are different? Well, if you have a positive times a negative, that's a negative. And a negative times a positive is also a negative. In other words, if the answer will be negative if the signs are different. So let's do a couple of examples for multiplying. So if you have -2 times a +3, remember, if you don't see a sign in front of a number, then that means it's positive. What do we have here? Well, in this case, the signs are different, so what does it mean our answer is going to be? It's going to be negative. So 2 times 3 is 6, and that'll give us a -6. So for number 2, are the signs the same or are they different? Well, we have -4 times -8, so the signs are the same. What does that mean our answer will be? Since they are the same, the answer will be positive. So we go 4 times 8 is 32, and we'll do positive 32 there. Would you try problems 3 through 6? If you're not sure, at least do them in your head and try to give a guess. But one of the things I want you looking at are the numbers, the integers, positive or negative. I'll go ahead and pause the video and restart it when you're ready to go. Okay, so for number 3, the signs are the same, so that means our answer is going to be positive. And 6 times 4 is 24. For number 4, we have 7 times -8. That means the signs are different. I've got a positive and a negative, so that means my answer will be a negative, so I'll put a negative sign, and 7 times 8 is 56, so we get -56 there. Number 5, -2 times 5. Signs are different. That gives us a -10. Number 6, -3 times -10. Signs are the same. That means our answer will be positive, so we'll get positive 30. If you have questions on why one answer was the way it was, then feel free to write those down and ask me on Edmodo, or you can ask me in class. So why does this work? Especially, at least for me, I had troubles wrapping my mind around why is a negative times a negative a positive. So I saw this explanation and I really kind of like it. If it makes sense to you, great, use it. If it doesn't make sense to you, that's okay too. Just put it down and maybe sometime later it'll make sense to you. But at least take a look at it and see what you think. So positive times a positive, that's pretty basic. That's something that you've probably been dealing with since you were in preschool. So think of it as money. I always like money. I'm a big fan of it. So if your bank puts if you put 5 deposits into your bank of $30 each, deposits are considered a positive. $30 is a positive. So you have 5 times 30, that's a positive 150 into your bank. That makes sense. How about a positive times a negative? How would we record that? And that comes out to a negative. That means you're 5 withdrawals of $30 each. So a withdrawal is considered a negative, and the money is $30. So you're taking out $30 each time, so that's a negative 150. That should kind of make sense to you. Now a negative times a positive. So here your bank loses track of 5 deposits of $30 each. So you're putting money into the bank, but the bank isn't recording it. So when you look at your bank statement, you're not seeing that money in your bank account. That would be a bad thing. That's a negative. So you're putting money in, but it's not showing up. So negative 5 deposits that were lost of $30, that's a bad thing. Now here's the negative times a negative equals a positive. So think of it as your bank loses track of you taking money out. So you're taking money out, say you have $200, you take $30 out, your bank says you still have $200. It's not very ethical, but that's kind of a nice thing. You're basically getting free money. That would be a positive. And we're not going to talk about how that's basically stealing. This is make-believe, so cut me a little bit of slack here. All right, so that's a brief explanation on one way you can think of how this works and why, especially why a negative times a negative is a positive. Okay, so would you try these problems again? Go ahead and pause the video when you're done. I want to give you a little bit of a hint here, especially for some of those problems like 9 through 15, where you have more than 2 integers. If you have an odd number of negatives, then the answer is going to be negative. If you have an even number of negatives, the answer is going to be positive. So keep that in mind as you're going through the problems and see what you get. So this would be where you pause and start the video back up when you're ready to go. Okay, so for number 7, we've got a negative times a negative. So that's 2 negatives. 2 is even, so my answer is going to be positive. 5 times 3 is 15, so I get positive 15. Number 8. 8 times a negative 4. Well, I have 1 negative. 1 is an odd number, so that means my answer is going to be negative. 4 times 8 is 32, so I should have negative 32 for an answer. Number 9. 2 times negative 3 times 5. Well, I have 1 negative there. 1 is odd, so that means my answer is going to be negative. So I have 2 times 3 times 5. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times 5 is 30. And I had 1 negative, so that means it's going to be negative 30. Number 10. Negative 2 times negative 1 times 6. I've got 2 negatives there. 2 is an even number, so my answer is going to be positive. So I do 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 6 is 12, and I get 12 for an answer. Number 11. How many negatives do you see there? Hopefully you said 3. I've got negative 7 times negative 2 times negative 3. 3 negatives. 3 is an odd number, so that means my answer is going to be negative, so I can put the negative sign, and then I'm just going to do my multiplication. Now I'm going to get a little ahead of ourselves here, and I'm going to use commutative property of multiplication. And I'm going to do 2 times 3 first. 2 times 3 is 6, and 6 times 7 is 42. Because if I did 7 times 2, that's 14. If you said 3 times 14, that might be kind of hard for some of you. So I moved it around a bit, and I'm allowed to do that because of commutative property of multiplication in this case. Same basic idea. And we get negative 42 there. Number 12. How many negatives do you see there? Well, we have negative 5 times negative 1 times negative 1 times 4. So I have 1, 2, 3 negatives. 3 is an odd number, so that means my answer is going to be negative. So I have 5 times 1 is 5, which I multiply by 4, and that gives me 20. And I'm going to have negative 20 here. Number 13. How many negatives do I have? 2. Negative 3 and negative 2. So since that's an even number, that means my answer is going to be positive. And I do 3 times 2 is 6. And then 6 times 6 is 36. And then 36 times 2, I should get positive 72. Number 14. How many negatives? 1, 2, 3, 4 negatives. 4 is an even number, so that means my answer is going to be positive. And I'm basically just doing 7 times 2 here, which is 14. Number 15. How many negatives do you see? 2. So that's an even, so that means my answer is going to be positive. 2 times 4 is 8, times 3 is 24. I should have positive 24 there. How many negatives do you see? 2. Means I'm positive. 5 times 2 is 10. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how to do when you're multiplying a lot of numbers and there's positives and negatives in there. If you have an odd number of negatives, answer is negative. If you have an even number of negatives, answer is positive. Now, dividing integers. So dividing positive and negative whole numbers including 0. Well, that basically is the same rule here. So if the signs are the same, the answer is positive. If the signs are different, the answer is negative. So do what we just got done doing. See if you can figure out the answers for these. Pause the video and come back when you're done. Okay, so 8 divided by negative 2, signs are different. That will be negative 4. Negative 10 divided by negative 5, signs are the same. That means the answer is going to be positive. That would be 2. Negative 24 divided by 3, signs are different. That means we're going to have a negative 8 for an answer. Number 20, negative 18 divided by 6, signs are different, so we get negative 3 there. Negative 72 divided by negative 8 is a positive 9. And 15 divided by negative 3, signs are different. That will give us negative 5. So it's really the same thing as the multiplying, which makes sense because they are inverse operations, meaning that they undo each other. And that's it. I will, in a moment, you'll see the lesson or the homework, but if you're in the regular class, you can start it. If you're in the flipped class, remember you do that in class.